When you're trying to figure out some really complicated instructions, maybe for putting furniture together,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
it makes you wonder about the most basic instructions of all, the ones for life itself. Are they just as complex?
Well, that's kind of the big question we're tackling today, isn't it?
It is. We're diving deep into this idea. Is DNA really?
Yeah.
Well, is it more like a sophisticated computer program than just a biological molecule?
It's a fascinating way to think about it, and it really gets to what a lot of current research is hinting at.
Right.
We're trying to look beyond just the A's, T's, C's, and G's, exploring this possibility that maybe AI, artificial intelligence, is the key to, well, unlocking the logic hidden inside.
Absolutely. Because when you look at the science, the recent stuff, it really does seem like DNA isn't just linear, not just a straight sequence.
Ah.
It seems to have layers, like a
Mhm.
program might have functions hidden inside other functions or secret bits of code.
And AI is really helping us see that now.
Yeah, pulling back the curtain on things like how proteins fold, which is incredibly complex.
Right.
We're figuring out what all that junk DNA is actually doing.
Exactly. That convergence is what's so striking. AI algorithms are spotting patterns in just massive amounts of genetic data.
Patterns humans just couldn't see.
Pretty much. Things that decades of standard biological methods just missed. And this opens up possibilities maybe for future tech that could, I don't know, write life's code, not just read it.
Okay, so think of this as our mission then, exploring life's operating system.
I like that.
We'll start with the basics, the DNA structure, then look at the evidence for it acting kind of like an algorithm.
Right.
We'll check out what AI is doing in genomics, touch on how we're already trying to sort of program biology.
Synthetic biology and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then get into the bigger, maybe philosophical questions about DNA as a language.
Yeah.
Sound good? Ready to boot up?
Definitely. Let's jump in. So the foundation. Most people have seen pictures of DNA, right? That famous double helix.
The spiral staircase.
Yeah. Exactly. And the steps are made of pairs of these four chemical bases, A, T, G, and C. Adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine.
And the key is they always pair up the same way, right? A with T, G with C.
That's the rule. A with T, G with C holds the whole thing together.
Okay, so that's the structure, the physical thing.
Yeah.
But how does it become the blueprint for life? That's where codons come in, those three-letter sequences.
Precisely. Think of them as the basic words in the instruction manual.
Gotcha.
These triplets of bases, the codons, each one tells the cell which amino acid to grab. And amino acids are the building blocks for proteins.
Okay.
So the DNA sequence gets, well, first it's copied into a slightly different molecule, RNA, that's transcription.
Right.
Then the RNA instructions are read to build the chain of amino acids, that's translation. And then that chain folds up into a working protein.
So DNA to RNA to protein. That's the central idea.
It's a core principle, yeah. The genetic code is like the dictionary that translates the DNA words into the amino acid language to build the protein machines.
And these protein machines do basically everything in our bodies. But, okay, here's the weird part. Only about, 1 or 2% of our DNA actually spells out the code for these proteins.
Yeah, it's a surprisingly small fraction.
So what's the other 98% doing? It used to be called non-coding DNA, which sounds kind of useless, like leftover bits.
That was the old thinking, junk DNA. But the more we look, the more we realize it's absolutely not junk.
So it is doing something important.
Oh, absolutely. It's packed with regulatory elements. Think of them like control switches for the genes.
Okay, like what?
Well, you have things called promoters. They're like the on switch for a gene. And enhancers, which are more like dimmer switches, controlling how much protein gets made.
Ah, okay, so controlling the volume.
Exactly. And there's other stuff too, structural bits that help organize the DNA in 3D space, different kinds of RNA molecules that don't code for proteins but have other jobs, even bits of DNA that can move around.
Wow. So it's like finding a hidden operating system running things behind the scenes.
That's a great analogy. It really is like that.
Okay, let's dig into that more. So we've got the main code for proteins, but then this huge amount of other DNA is sort of orchestrating everything, turning genes on and off, controlling levels.
Right, and the comparison to computer code gets even stronger here.
How so?
Because research is showing DNA itself has these characteristics that seem almost algorithmic, like it follows logical rules.
Algorithmic, what does that mean in this context?
Well, for instance, studies back in 2007 by Itzkovitz and Alan showed the genetic code seems remarkably optimized.
Optimized for what?
Optimized to carry extra layers of information within the protein coding parts themselves.
Wait, hold on. Extra information packed into the same sequence that codes for a protein. How does that even work?
Think of it like, okay, imagine a sentence where the words mean one thing, but maybe the first letter of each word spells out a secret message.
Oh, like an acrostic.
Sort of, yeah. So the DNA sequence spells out the amino acids for a protein, but at the same time, woven into that same sequence might be signals for, say, where a regulatory protein should bind, or instructions for how the RNA copy should be processed, or even how it should fold up.
That's incredible. So it's like
Yeah.
multiple tracks of information laid down on top of each other. Super dense.
Exactly. Multi-track recording is a good way to put it. It's incredibly efficient information storage.
And it's not just about the sequence of letters, A, T, C, G, is it? I remember reading something about the actual shape of the DNA molecule mattering too.
You're absolutely right. Research by Parker and Tullius around 2011 really highlighted this. They found evidence that the specific 3D shape, the physical twists and bends of the DNA molecule itself, can encode functional information.
So the shape isn't just random.
It seems not. Evolution appears to have preserved specific shapes in certain regions, suggesting the physical form is crucial for its job, kind of like how the physical layout of a microchip determines what it does.
Okay, so let's recap. We have the basic sequence, these overlapping codes packed inside, and the physical 3D shape all carrying information. It's getting harder and harder to just call it a simple molecule.
Right. It feels much more like a highly compressed, super efficient data storage system.
Which brings us back to AI. How does artificial intelligence fit into deciphering this incredibly dense, complex system?
This is where things get really exciting. Think about how AI, especially those huge language models, have revolutionized how we understand human language.
Right, like ChatGPT and things like that.
Exactly. They learn grammar, context, relationships between words by analyzing massive amounts of text. Well, researchers are now applying similar AI techniques to the language of biology, DNA, and protein sequences.
So training AI on huge biological data sets.
Precisely. Feeding it genomes, protein sequences, experimental data, and letting it find the patterns.
And what are the results? What can these AI models actually do?
One of the biggest breakthroughs, really a landmark achievement, is protein structure prediction.
Figuring out how those amino acid chains fold up.
Exactly. For decades, predicting that 3D shape just from the linear sequence was a massive headache in biology. A grand challenge.
And AI solved it.
Pretty much. Systems like DeepMind's AlphaFold and later Meta AI's ESMFold showed they could predict protein structures with amazing accuracy. It was a huge leap.
Wow. Why is that so important?
Because a protein's shape is its function, essentially. How it interacts with other molecules, what jobs it can do in the cell, it all depends on that intricate 3D fold.
Okay, so AI can now reliably predict the functional shape from the initial DNA instructions. That's huge. How does that connect back to DNA being like a language?
Well, the DNA sequence is the initial instruction, right? AI learning to predict the final shape means it's learning to read and understand a key output of that genetic code.
Makes sense.
But it goes beyond just proteins. AI is now digging into those non-coding regions we talked about earlier, the 98%.
And finding actual functions, things those regions are actively doing.
Absolutely. Real instructions, not just padding. For example, researchers at the Garvin Institute use machine learning to find potential cancer drivers hidden in non-coding DNA.
Hidden? How?
Their AI tool looked at places where a specific protein, CTCF, binds to DNA. CTCF helps organize the DNA's 3D structure. They found mutations in these binding sites were common in cancer cells.
Suggesting that messing up the DNA's organization in 3D can lead to cancer.
Exactly. It implies these non-coding regions are active players in controlling cell growth, and when they break, things can go wrong. They're not just passive.
That really changes the picture. This dark matter of the genome might be a vital control panel. And wasn't there similar work connecting non-coding regions to autism?
Yes, that was work out of Princeton. They used AI to analyze non-coding DNA, looking for mutations linked to autism spectrum disorder.
And they found some.
They did. The AI could predict how tiny changes in these regulatory regions might affect how genes are turned on or off, revealing patterns that older methods just missed. It's like AI gives us a super high-resolution microscope for the genome.
Okay, this is genuinely transformative. AI isn't just reading the code. It's helping us decode layers we didn't even know existed and finding meaning in parts we dismissed.
Right.
Which naturally leads to the next step. If we can read it this well, can we start writing it? programming life.
We're definitely heading in that direction. That's the whole field of synthetic biology.
Which is what, exactly?
It's basically about applying engineering principles to biology, designing and building new biological parts or devices or whole systems, or even re-engineering existing ones for new purposes.
Like building with biological Lego blocks.
That's a common analogy, yeah. Developing standardized parts, sometimes called biobricks, that you can snap together in predictable ways, kind of like software libraries for biology.
Right. And then there's CRISPR gene editing. That feels like very direct programming, doesn't it?
It really does. CRISPR-Cas9 lets scientists make very precise cuts and changes to DNA sequences. It's like having a find and replace function for the genetic code.
So we can literally edit the code of life now.
With pretty amazing accuracy, yes. As a review from 2022 pointed out, it's fundamental to a lot of synthetic biology work now. There are still challenges, of course.
Like what?
Making sure you only edit the place you want to edit, avoiding off-target changes and making it work efficiently in different types of cells. But it's an incredibly powerful tool for rewriting genetic instructions.
It really feels like we're in the assembly language phase of genetic programming. CRISPR is like our basic text editor. And maybe AI will become the more advanced tool, like an intelligent code completer or debugger, helping us design totally new genetic programs.
That's the exciting frontier. People are already using AI to try and design brand new proteins with specific jobs, or optimize gene expression, or predict what will happen if you make certain genetic changes.
So the idea is, if AI can learn the rules of the genetic language,
it could potentially start writing new functional sentences in that language, generating novel genetic code for specific biological tasks.
Wow. Okay, this really pushes us into some deep questions, doesn't it? If DNA is this complex, layered, algorithmic language, and AI can read, and maybe even write it, how does that change how we think about life itself?
It's a huge shift in perspective.
Is DNA more like a language that just evolved naturally, with all the quirks and ambiguities that implies? Or is it more like a really precise, symbolic system, almost like it was designed?
That's the million-dollar question, maybe billion-year question.
Yeah.
It definitely evolved through natural selection, but it operates with this incredible precision, very clear rules for interpretation, which feels more like a design system.
So maybe it's both.
Possibly. Maybe it's a unique category, a naturally evolved system that functions with algorithmic precision.
And what does it say about us, about our understanding, if AI can find patterns and functions in DNA that humans completely missed for decades?
It's humbling, honestly.
Yeah.
The fact that AI can spot function in regions we call junk really shows how much we probably don't know about the genome. We might just be scratching the surface.
Like, we understood basic grammar, but missed all the poetry and subtext.
That's a good way to put it. We might only be starting to grasp the full depth of information encoded in DNA. Are we starting to unlock a fundamental language of nature?
Which makes you wonder about the future. People talk about things like DNA compilers.
Right. Tools that could translate between, say, a computer language and genetic code.
Yeah. Could we eventually have, like, biological operating systems? Could we actually write new kinds of life, like we write software apps today?
It sounds like science fiction, but grounded in current progress, these ideas seem less fantastical than they used to.
Really? DNA compilers.
The concept makes sense tools to abstract away the tricky details of gene editing. And if you can standardize biological functions, maybe biological operating systems aren't completely out there.
And writing new species.
That raises enormous questions, ethical and practical, but purely technically. The way AI and genomics are converging, it might eventually be possible.
Yeah, awe-inspiring.
Yeah.
And maybe a little unnerving, too.
Definitely. The potential for good in medicine, agriculture, just understanding life is immense.
But the power is huge.
Absolutely. Needs careful thought as we go forward.
So wrapping up this deep dive then, let's go back to that main question. We've talked about DNA's structure, the algorithmic stuff, like parallel codes and shape info.
Right. The Itzkovitz and Ullmann work, Parker and Tullius.
The AI breakthroughs, like AlphaFold. Finding meaning in non-coding DNA.
Garvin, Princeton research.
Our first steps in actually programming with synthetic biology and CRISPR.
Early days, but happening.
And this whole idea of DNA as a language. So, bottom line, could we say DNA really is an algorithmic language that AI is getting better and better at decoding?
You know, based on all that evidence, I think it's becoming harder not to see it that way. It has so many characteristics of an algorithmic language.
The structure, the instructions, the optimization.
The multiple layers of information, the role of physical shape. It all points to something much more sophisticated than just a chemical sequence. It feels like an information processing system.
And AI is the key to unlocking it.
AI, with its power to see patterns in massive data, seems uniquely suited to learn this language. Yeah. We're definitely entering an era where we can decipher it like never before.
It's just mind-bending to think that inside our tiny cells is this incredibly complex code, this ancient language that we're only now, with AI's help, really starting to understand and maybe even speak.
Yeah.
Really makes you wonder, doesn't it? As AI and genomics keep accelerating, what are the future possibilities or maybe the ethical challenges around reading and writing life's code that you, listening right now, find most compelling or maybe most concerning? Definitely something to think about.